Hello and welcome to the Partner Strategy Network podcast. I'm Wesley Coelho and I'm here with my co-host Mark Sochin, who is the author of The Art of Strategic Partnering, and thrilled to introduce our guest, Kim Fennell. Welcome, Kim.
Hey guys, it's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
All right, and Kim is a venture partner at True North Fund, and via Fleet Hill Ventures, he has a portfolio of literally dozens of angel investments. He serves as a director on the boards of several companies. He's held a number of CEO positions, and in 2015, he was the CEO of this company called Descartes, which was an independent mapping software company that was acquired by Uber. And then at Uber, Kim was the head of the business development for US and Canada, as well as global technology partnerships, where he was leading 8 different teams across Uber's different verticals, doing deals with companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, doing deals with Live Nation, major airports, pro sports teams, and venues. What an exciting position. And Kim, it's an incredible background, and just so excited to have you on the podcast to share your insights on partnering.
Great. And Kim, so great to have you here. And I thought great starting place would be to define business development, because business development seems to have so many different meanings. Sometimes it's sales, sometimes strategic partnerships, sometimes M&A. So can you give us your definition of what business development means to you?
Yeah, and again, thanks for having me on the podcast, guys. This should be fun. As I was mentioning to you once before, biz dev is one of those like really badly used terms. It's one of the most inconsistently used terms in the general world of sales and partnerships. But to me, it kind of boils down to three different things. And I see some, particularly startups these days, sometimes they use the word business development to really mean sales. And maybe I'm old school, but I grew up in enterprise sales, B2B sales, and the idea was, look, if you're selling a product and the customer is giving you money and the money's flowing back to you, you're in sales. And if you have a head of sales who doesn't like calling themselves the head of sales, maybe they shouldn't be in sales. But that's the way I view it. And so the win was getting the revenue from that sale, and you measure success based on performance against targets. On the other hand, there's another use for biz dev, and I used to have this in some of my sales teams, where you're sometimes allocating people to work on really, really long-term deals, or in many cases, trying to land an indirect distribution deal, a channel partnership. And that's different. The win was creating the distribution deal. And along the way, what you would try to do is you would try to get some minimum revenue guarantees for that. But you measured them differently on that. It was kind of like getting the win and the minimum revenue guarantee. So that was biz dev and kind of within the sales world. But the third one, and this one's important for people to know, is if you think you're selling into somebody who's in biz dev, it might mean something different if you're talking to somebody at Uber or Google or Meta, where what biz dev is really partnerships. And there, if you think about it in terms of the way the money flows, a lot of times, so I ran business development for US and Canada for Uber. We were the ones actually spending the money. But what was happening was we would be doing a deal, say, with a pro sports team, like, say, I'll give you a quick example, the Golden State Warriors. We would negotiate, give them money so we could have a dedicated drop-off pickup area, signage inside, digital rights for some of their players. And we were providing the money to them, negotiate the best terms we could. But the way you measure success in that is that ultimately you're doing the deal because over time, your company's going to get that much more revenue back because of that partnership. But again, the money flows differently. So it's really important to understand the differences.
So Kim, I'd like to dive into your role in leading partnerships at Uber. Can you tell us what your teams were focused on there?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, and Uber was a lot of fun. It was crazy. I was there from the beginning of 2015 to end of 2019. To put that in perspective, where there were 3,000 people when I started and 27,000 people when I left 5 years later. It was a little crazy. I had 8 different teams. I won't go through all of them, but they were everything from technology partnerships with people like Google and Apple. We had teams focused on safety. We had teams focused on, I had an airports team. We had a sports and entertainment team. I mean, the airports one, for instance, people I think can relate to, that's where we had people negotiating with each airport. And by the way, the airports kind of hated us. This is going back to like 2017. And, for instance, I would go and speak annually at this thing called, I didn't know it was a thing, but it was the Association of executives, and there'd be like 200 CEOs of different airports around the country, and I would go in and talk about wanting to partner. And I still remember one time the CEO of Dallas Fort Worth Airport came up to me afterwards and said, Kim, that was really nice, but I just want you to know, like, we really hate your company. So we're trying to start a partnership from that perspective.
Right.
Okay, well, first step is, I'll meet you in the bar later. Let's talk about, let me understand what's on your mind and how we can fix this. But what we were trying to do was, A, get the right to do drop-offs and pickups, then B, negotiate how much money we had to pay them for that. And then along the way, you'd have different kind of issues come up, like at SFO, we made a few years ago, they wanted to move us from the curb to the garage. We tried to fight that. We had a Twitter campaign going on where I seriously had riders and drivers sending tweets and direct messages to the CEO of SFO, which was and he was a really nice guy, by the way. But in the end, we a little bit of a pressure point there, and we ended up negotiating something that we have today, where some of the cars are at the airport or at the up in the garage, but things like Uber X or Black and XL you still get at the curb. And all kinds of, like Toronto, Mark, you'll know the Toronto airport. We couldn't get an Uber X there, but we finally negotiated.
And why was that?
They just didn't want it. They wanted to protect the taxi business there. And so through a long process, we negotiated and talked about why this would be better. And in the end, we got it. But in return, we also asked for and negotiated the rights, but had to pay for. When you're in Toronto Pearson Airport, there's a very nice Uber waiting area with all kinds of like plants and waiting seats, and we kind of actually pissed off our competitor, Lyft, at the time. But that's kind of some stuff you got to do.
And that was that was your mission, right? So you were able to block out other rideshare competitors through the negotiations of your business development team.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember I think you asked me one of the other fun ones. We did a deal with Live Nation. So we negotiated the rights at Live Nation's 105 concerts around the world. And that was kind of cool. But what we did was, and again, there's an example where we're paying them the money, is negotiating how much. But in return for that, we would get a dedicated drop-off and pickup area with great signage and everything, but Lyft would not be allowed to do it. So at all these concerts, there's only Uber, so you got great signage. So it's really good for your brand. The ancillary benefit, for me was, hey, for a change, I got some nice opportunities to work with the Live Nation folks who were great bunch of people. Got to go to a lot of really good concerts with kind of backstage pass access. So the first time, I think in my life, my kids actually thought, hey, Dad's got a cool job. This is great.
Well, that's
great. What you do. Yeah.
Right.
Nice. Well, and share with us, I know for viewers of this podcast, they're really looking for the tips and tricks and, some of the hard-won experience. And you have a unique experience that you work both, in partnerships in a big company with Uber, with thousands of employees, as well as startups. Can you give us some of the tips on partnership deals, some things to do, some things to avoid?
Yeah. It's funny. I was just talking with a entrepreneur, CEO of a small company about this morning, an earlier call. And having been there, when you're this little company and you're trying to sell into an Uber or a Google or Meta or whatever, I think the first thing you have to learn is patience, because what's going on is in your mind you've got this big freaking deal you're trying to close, and your team's asking about it, your board's asking you about it, and for all of you, it's on your mind. But you got to remember the other end of the story. The other end of the line, it's a big company. They got a million things they're thinking about. Trust me, they're not waking up every morning thinking about you and your deal. So, things and things at large companies, they just slow down. I mean, I mentioned at Uber, it was a very entrepreneurial, fast-moving company. But by the time we got to 27,000 people, yes, we still moved fast, but it was a lot slower than it had been before. And everything, you're going through an amazing amount of financial analysis to make sure the deal's right. And the people you're dealing with, they just got a lot of other things on their plate. So you got to understand that, and you'll come up with all kinds of reasons as to why it's slowing down. And the reality is that sometimes it's just time and communication. But, look, I think the key is you have to find a champion inside. That's how you get in the door.
So important.
In the first place. Absolutely. It's and it's not always the most senior person on the org chart. We used to have an expression, find the fox, find the key influencer inside that organization who can really make things happen. But you also have to understand the company that you're selling into and what is the win for them. I mean, you may be selling your product and you think about all these features and capabilities you've got. The buyer on the other side may be using it for a very, very different, not so much different purpose, but they've got a particular solution in mind. And you have to keep that in mind. I'll give you a quick example. It's another Uber one, but we're looking at dash cams. Well, so we're talking all these different dash cam companies and whatnot. And it's not like we're interested in dash cams because we love cameras. No, what we're trying to solve is an insurance problem and an accident cost for our insurance. We're trying to lower that. So our need was very specific around lowering that issue. Cameras might have been a solution for that. So as a seller into that, you have to really understand what is the problem that the large company is trying to solve for, and how are they going to measure success on that. And as you go through that, a lot of times the key is find that product manager who's trying to launch that feature in that time frame, and what's a win for them. And it's also important to understand the launch timeframes. So if they know, and if you can find this out early in the process, if you know when they're expected to get that feature or that product into market, then at some point you get leverage, because if they start slowing things down, that can help you in your negotiation on that as well. And the other,
Kim, I thought it was really interesting that you mentioned, finding that product manager. And I think it's counterintuitive for a lot of companies that they think, oh, we got to start with the partnership people. But a lot of times the partnership people are the gatekeepers, right?
100% right. No, at the end of the day, the one with the budget is the product person. What'll happen is, again, this could be Google, this could be Meta, this could be, they'll bring in that partnerships team to work on the deal. But now you're dealing with a different animal that gets measured in different ways. So if you're dealing with the biz dev or the partnerships person, they get measured on how many deals they do in the year and the deal terms and how good the deal terms are. But at the end of the day, they also can't be the ones that screw things up and cause a delay in the launch. So if you know that as well, you know that there's a certain timeline that they have to meet. So you can kind of work that to your advantage. And then I would say, speaking of timing, the last thing I'd mention on this particular topic is understand the company's fiscal year planning process. For most people, it's a calendar year. And so a lot of times the projects for next year and how resources get allocated, they start deciding that in August, September, October. Decisions are made in the November timeframe. Budgets are approved in December, so they launch in January. So if you want to be installed next year, you've got to start getting that approval process in the fall. Otherwise, you may miss a whole year, because the way they measure success inside of their companies is resources are allocated, KPIs are set, and nobody wants to deviate from that to go and look at your little project when they're getting measured on all the other things that they've been assigned. So sometimes it's really hard to break into that.
And so it sounds like the realistic cycles, and this may be difficult to manage with a board or with the management team, is going to be 6 to 9 months. What's the fastest deal you've seen done? And of course, I guess there's lots of examples of deals that go on forever. But what's some of the quick?
Sometimes the opposite happens too. If there's a sudden urgent need in a big company, trust me, they'll move fast and they'll steamroll you. I mean, and they will maybe move faster even than you want to move. But those are more the exception. Traditionally, it just takes longer than you think it's going to.
One of the things I would like to ask you about is just, some of how it gets messy when you're partnering, but you've also got a direct business, right? And how do you solve, for some of your portfolio companies that you advise and so on, how do you coach them to, manage the boundaries between the direct motion and the indirect motion and some of the channel conflict issues that can arise there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic that's as old as sales, really. I mean, it really starts, you want to decide up front in your kind of go-to-market game plan with your product strategy. Are you going to sell direct with your own salespeople, or are you going to have an indirect sales channel, or are you going to have a hybrid? You're going to do both. So you have to think about that up front. Some of that has to do with the type of product you're selling. I mean, is it something that, you've got thousands and thousands of customers where coverage is going to be really important, where an indirect channel can really help you get that coverage? Or are you more of a kind of a rifle shot kind of company with, you're just going after very large customers and there's very few deals, and that's where maybe 100% direct might make sense. But oftentimes coverage is important, particularly for the early stage of a company where what's most important for you is have that first mover advantage. Or, I describe it as you're trying to define a hill and own it. And so how do you own it? How do you be the one in that space? And sometimes that means you get some indirect channels so that you get that geographic or maybe vertical coverage, and you kind of blanket the market. And you're going to give up margin in that sense, but what you're making up for it is coverage and ownership of that number one space, and then you can kind of go from there. But you're right, Wesley, it can get messy, and the thing I try to tell companies all the time, having lived through this, is channel conflict's okay between direct and indirect, but you've got to be really protective of your indirect channel. You can't make it look like you're going to always favor your direct channels over your indirect. As soon as you screw your indirect channel one time, and it happens once, that will spread like wildfire inside that channel, and you will lose trust. So you have to protect that channel. That doesn't mean you pay everybody and you kind of there are certain exceptions to the rule, but sometimes there's going to be a loser in that. But sometimes you have to protect that indirect channel and say to the direct sales, hey, no, this turf is the indirect area. We lined them up for that reason. We have certain expectations from them and minimum revenue guarantees. We're going to protect that. And I'm sorry, you're going to lose out on that.
Yeah, that's really great. Such an important point. You have to have the discipline and the consistency of knowing where the partners can win. Otherwise, they're going to lose confidence.
So Kim, you've inked the big deal. The big dream deal has been inked with Uber. And how do you make the deal effective? I think we've all seen, that it's one thing to ink the deal. It's another to actually effectively execute the deal. Do you have any thoughts on that you can share?
Oh yeah, and this is a constant mistake I see sometimes, is where everybody has the big win. You sign that distribution contract or that large deal with that company that's going to suddenly kind of 10x your company in your mind. This is great. And everybody does a high five and goes out and has some drinks and celebrates the win. And then you kind of wonder why no sales are coming in. And it's like, okay, no. Now the real work starts. What you have to do is you've got to invest in that relationship. You've got to invest. If it's a channel, you got to invest in the channel. You have to allocate sales resources to help their sales resources. I used to call it, you kind of got to lead them to water so that they can drink. And sometimes they don't drink, so you got to drink for them, and you've got to show them the way. And the best thing you can do, if it's a channel partner, for example, go out on sales calls with them, show how the sale is made, and make a hero inside that channel. And the sooner you can make some heroes inside that channel, that spreads, the word spreads inside that channel that, hey, this is a great company to work with. They've got a great product. We can make our sales numbers by working with this company, and everybody can kind of, all boats rise, so to speak. But if you don't invest in that with meetings or setting metrics or going on the sales calls with them, and you expect it just to happen, you're going to be really disappointed.
Yeah, so critical to prime the pump and just take on some of that heavy lifting to get the momentum going, and then it can scale from there, right? So.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you have any suggestions, kind of best practices on kind of cadence calls? The times you might meet with the key sponsors and people to make things are on track, and where help is needed or course correction is needed, adjustments can be made.
Yeah, and if it's me, I'm looking to try to do it more often than probably the channel wants to do it. And so I would err to the side of too much. So if you can have a weekly call with your partner and say, okay, hey, we set out goals for this month or this quarter. How are you going against those? Do some account reviews, what have you. Just having a regular cadence and keeping it on the calendar as a regular cadence, so that everybody has that expectation that there's going to be a check-in. I would try to do that weekly.
Nice.
So one of the things that often comes up in partnerships is the elephant partner comes along and you're a small startup and they need you to customize your software pretty extensively, to make that deal. What guidance do you tend to give your portfolio companies when they come across that situation?
Yeah, it happens a lot where there's this one great big revenue opportunity job, and the problem is it looks really great, but it doesn't quite fit the sweet spot of our product market fit. But if you squint hard enough, it looks like it might be a fit. but to do it, you got to take engineering resources away from your core product and roadmap and allocate it to this to do some customization. And those are hard. And I have faced those as a CEO a number of times, particularly in the early stages when you're trying to get traction, and you think, and sometimes you think, hey, any revenue is good revenue, but it's not. And not all revenue is good revenue. And sometimes your board can be helpful in helping you kind of stay within the guidelines or in staying on the road a little bit. But look, it doesn't mean you shouldn't. You just got to be really clear-eyed about what are the trade-offs you're doing and why you're doing it. So I would say, you want to try to avoid them. But if it truly can be game, it just means qualification is so important in that. Mark, you know that so well. It's just in any sales and any business kind of situation, qualify. And if this really can, A, you can make it happen, and B, it's not going to kill your company in terms of resources to do it, then fine, you do it, but really, really clear-eyed.
So Kim, what's your thoughts and what's your recommendations to portfolio companies when you're looking at when they should consider their partnership strategy? Is there a certain timing of starting out early or waiting till the business is more established? What's your thoughts and guidance on that?
Oh, yeah. No, it's right up front. I mean, I think it's part of your core company strategy. You think about your company strategy, which then you get your product strategy underneath that. Part of your product strategy then becomes your go-to-market strategy. And as you think about your go-to-market, that comes back to what we were maybe talking about in an earlier question about, are you going to go direct, are you going to go indirect? Are there going to be some large either technology partnerships that you might have, or some marketing partnerships you might have, or a sales channel partnership that you might have? But that to me is, if I'm evaluating a deal as an angel investor, potentially I'm asking that question right up front is, what's your go-to-market game plan? How are you going to get to market? How are you going to, as I talked about earlier, how are you defining your hill, and how are you going to own that hill and defend it, and how are you going to get to market? So, no, that's got to be done right up front.
So you got to get that right from the front. It's not like you're expecting a certain amount of revenue before you kick in your partner strategy.
No, sure. Along the way, as you get traction, you're going to get, the good news is hopefully you get more people wanting to work with you, and that's great, and you can start to kind of digest those and sift through those and see how they can help you as well. But you really have to have a lot of that thought through right up front.
Well, and I think that a lot of times it's a first mover advantage, right? So we talked earlier about Uber having dash cam partnerships. If you can lock in an early partnership as a dash cam vendor, then presumably you're locking out the competition down the road, because you're typically the strategic partner wants to work with one or two partners at most.
Yeah. No, you're spot on there.
Great. Well, any final tips that you want to close off on, some guidance or advice?
I guess I would only say, look, I love working with small companies. One of the things I just try to remind them is, I talked a little bit about it, say, defining your hill and owning it and all that kind of stuff. That's pretty classic stuff. But look, you just got to keep moving, man. It's like move, and always be thinking about disruption, meaning not only just who are you trying to disrupt, but I would come to work every day wondering, hey, what's Google going to do to me today, or who's going to disrupt me? You got to be worried all the time, man. But that's part of the gig.
Excellent. All right. Well, it's been a great discussion, and thank you so much for the incredibly valuable insights that you've been able to share, as well as a lot of your experiences. So many great tips, and just wanted to. So thanks for joining us. And for folks who want to learn more, come join the discussion on the Partner Strategy Network LinkedIn group.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.